Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Spilling the Beans, and a very happy new year to all the listeners. It's been a while. It feels like it's been a while anyway. I think it's a couple of weeks since the Cheltenham podcast when we last put one out. Obviously having a well-earned break over the festive period. It's not easy, running the finest fanzine in the land. So we had a well-earned rest, but we're back to it now, back to it a little bit ahead of schedule. We're going to come on board next week and record, but obviously Barrow soccer being like we are at the moment, there is news developing daily, and obviously big news came out yesterday as we're recording this on Saturday morning at the Bristol game. So we thought we'd jump on the podcast, try and get a quick half an hour so we can gather the thoughts of our fine guests who are for this show, Mr. Dave Ingham and Mr. Ronan McCarthy. Dave, how are you?
Not too bad, Johnny. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to all our listeners. And here we go again for another new era.
Good stuff. Have you got many resolutions in place, Dave? You got big expectations of 2026?
Absolutely zero. I settled into a rut a few years ago. I'm quite happy in that rut until I reach retirement, and then I'll start enjoying my weeks instead of doing the corporate grind. But as some things never change, Barrow Soccer's there at the end of the week to kind of raise you up or to knock you down. So long may that continue.
Yeah. What about you, Ronan? Were you back with the alarm clock this morning, getting you ready for Monday morning?
Yeah, morning, Johnny. Alarm clock is ready to go for Monday morning and get back to the grind of the corporate world, as Dave says, and getting it forward down the spreadsheet tomorrow and all that jazz.
The joy of spreadsheets. A big shout out to Matt Burns, the spreadsheet master. Let's crack on. It's quite a lot to talk about, so when I was pulling the agenda through, obviously there's been so many games since Cheltenham. I've even started to forget myself who we played and what was the crack. But I know there's been a lot of 2-1s in there. There's been a lot of nearly wins, and obviously a glorious one at Tranmere. But let's start with the Salford game, Dave, because you wrote the match report. It was obviously the final hurrah for Neil McDonald. How did you kind of sum up that interim period?
Yeah, I think the Salford game was a good example of the whole interim period in the fact that there was areas where it was improved from kind of like the opening month of the season, but the same old frailties were still there. So it kind of showed where we are as a team, and as a club, maybe against some of the bigger hitters in the division, that we can go toe to toe with them for a while. But I think they've always the better teams at the top end of the division have maybe got that kind of killer punch in them. I said in the match report that the goal that they scored, the second goal, it's exactly the type of goal that we don't score. If you think back to Accrington, where Josh Gordon and I think it was Fletcher were racing through, and we had a 2-on-1, and we still managed to cock it up. We kind of, allowed their defence to get back, and we, was he going to have a shot? Was he going to try and play it off? Salford didn't do that. Quick release. Matey boy took it 20, 30 yards in very short order and fired it past Stanway. No dithering, no indecision, just get it done. And that's the kind of quality that we've been missing all season, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Ronan, that the Salford game kind of played out pretty much how Cheltenham did, pretty much how Accrington did, where it seemed like there was some better stuff in there. I felt it was a better watch at times, but just not having that clinical nature to able to kind of get us over the line or kind of defend them sort of pressures late in the second half.
Yeah, I thought it was maybe a bit of a better rounded performance than Aki and Cheltenham. I thought it wasn't just sort of like a 45-minute switch off that the other two seemed to be. I thought for large parts of the game we competed and we were all right, to be honest. But like Dave says, it's two moments, the second of which it just seems like mistakes again to me. The first of which is just your defenders on one side switched off and can't transition over properly. And then the second one's MJ doesn't know to make the foul, make the tackle, and get another booking when we've had the same last week, we've lost another man. And then, the goal, could it be saved? I don't know. But I was feeling more confidence leaving on whatever day of the week it was, New Year's Day, than I was over the last couple of games. I just thought it seemed a better performance. But I was thinking that we do need to sort of move on quickly and get our sort of ducks in a row off the back of that mind.
What do you think that is then in terms of, because obviously if you look at this interim period, I don't think there was any Barrow fan who wanted McDonald to get the job. I think that was pretty clear after very early on. What do you think's been different recently from how we were playing under wing? You just finish your drink, Ron, and take your time. Don't worry.
Very, very little, to be honest. I don't think much has changed. If we're being really clear, I think we've been sort of a bit fortuitous that Fletcher's come in as a second striker and looked a lot better than what Hemmings was offering us, and I think that's really benefited us. Finding that, I think he sort of links up the play a little bit better. He's lacking, a yard of pace, to be honest, if we're being really brutal about it. But I don't think that's necessarily a negative, because it sort of brings other players into the game. Ben Whitfield's been fantastic in the sort of last 3 to 4 games. But in large handfuls, not a lot has changed. We've just got a couple of players back, and that's maybe made us a little bit better in a few games. But I think, we're still at that stage where we're having to chop and change, and something changed every week because we either get a suspension or an injury.
Yeah, is that fortuitous, Dave, the Fletcher thing, or do you think that's something McDonald and Cole can take credit for? Because if I remember correctly, I mean, drank a lot over the last couple of weeks. I think it was around about sort of just after half time, Hemmings came off at Accrington, replaced with Fletcher, and looked better. It's certainly one of them games where that change was made, and as soon as Fletcher came on, it seemed to kind of give Gordon that little bit more support and a little bit more cutting edge up front.
Yeah, I mean, the proactive change that was made was to go up to the 2 up front in the first place, but then obviously it was kind of accidental that Fletcher's gone into that role. But again, that's probably a function of the fact that, when he's turning around and looking at the bench, I think it was Fletcher was the only option that day. I know Cameron was on the bench against Salford, but I think it was only Fletcher that he could potentially put up there. So it was maybe a bit of design and a bit of accident, but I think we've kind of stumbled upon something that, gives us something extra. Whether it'll be the solution for the entire second half of the season, I don't know, but I think it's safe to say that there will be personnel changes in January, so let's see how that pans out.
Yeah, it was pretty early on against Accrington where he made a change 34 minutes for Hemmings, so I imagine that was a forced change, but like you say, it seems like they stumbled on something there. But seen a bit of Vince Cameron a bit more over the last couple of weeks. You seen anything more in him, Dave, that makes you think that his second half to his Barrow tenure could be better than his first?
No.
Next question.
If Ian Wood managed to get 6 figures out of Dundee for Emil Aqua, then, if he can get 20 quid out of Inverurie Locos for Innis Cameron, then he's done very well. I sound really harsh, don't I? Because I've kind of dug him out a few times, but I'm really basic. I'm not a modern football man, reading me Mundial long reads and sipping on a triple hopped IPA. I want my strikers to score goals. I don't want to see him in the half space and doing this, that and the other. I want someone who's going to put centre halves under pressure. I want someone who's going to take shots that make the goalkeeper work, and I want to see someone who scores goals, and I've not seen it so far in Innis, but, who knows? Maybe new year, new era, maybe he's going to turn into, the Scottish Michael Cheek. Who knows?
Yeah. Just before we move on, Ron, and I know you've always got your eye on the wider league, and kind of who's hot and who's not. Where do you rate Salford at the moment? Because I thought it was interesting, your match report, Dave, where you're saying it's kind of changed from the Class of 92 thing and the whole kind of buzz around the documentary to actually kind of cold hard cash and sponsors like AIG. Do you see them kind of getting out of it this year?
I was a little bit sceptical on Salford because he sort of signed a few, not unknown quantities, but a few players that they probably wouldn't go for historically. They've gone for a bit of a different sort of model, if you want to call it that. But players like Daniel Ado is coming through, and Mai, who's played on the wing, I think was there last year. Some boffin will probably correct me to say that he wasn't. And they look decent. I thought they were all right. Like I put in a different group on sort of half time saying this Salford team's, all right here. But we went toe to toe with them for large parts of the game, minus a couple of, bits of error. But like Dave said before, their second goal is just because they're better than us in to an extent. When they break, they're quick, they're decisive, and that's what we've been lacking. But I was largely impressed by Salford. I thought they were one of the better teams we played this season. But mind you, I thought MK Dons at home right at the start probably the best team we played this season, and they're below them. So what do I know?
Yeah, and just kind of linking into Salford game as well, because the big things happened at the club on New Year's Day was the opening of the 1901 suite, which is kicking off the 125-year celebration of Barrow AFC, which it will be this year, which we're going to get Steve on the next pod to tell us a little bit more about Barrow 125. But this is the club's first effort in recognising that historical milestone with the new booze quarter in the crossbar and the Steelworks End. Quite a few people, quite a packed room, rolling with lots of people in there. You had some good conversations. What was your kind of takeaways from that? Who did you get to speak to, and what did you learn?
Yeah, on a whole, the room seemed like a well-executed effort in terms of the product that was presented. It did seem very Barrow football, really. It was quite a sleek, nice, modern bit of kit that they sort of offered randomly. But no, and the first person to be negative about the football club, so I'll be the first person to be positive at the same time. It was a really good effort. I think there was a little bit of feedback given at the end to the powers that be that there could be a couple of minor tweaks and you could have an extremely good product there. One being, can we just end Carlin as an entity? But I don't think they've got that power. And yeah, it was nice to speak to Ian Wood came round, had a couple of conversations, one shared with myself and Dave. Ricky came round and sort of spoke about the room and the plans as a whole for a year. So I think that's not just a one room and dump sort of option with the 1901 lounge, which is nice, which is good. In terms of what we spoke about, I don't know, Dave, when we sort of spoke to him, I wasn't expecting an announcement the next couple of days. He really did keep his cards close to his chest on that one.
Yeah, it was a funny one because I think I walked in, and then as soon as I walked in and joined you guys on the table, Ian kind of came across and said, any questions? And, people who kind of followed me on Twitter would have seen that I had a bit of a wobble after the Accrington game in terms of what's happening, where we're going, what's the strategy. And I thought, right, well, don't be a keyboard warrior, Dave. Actually ask the man who can give you some answers. So I did. What's the plan? Are we going external? And to be fair to him, he kind of answered the various questions, and obviously he wasn't going to, he didn't give us a, this is the secret plan sort of thing, but he kind of assured us that things were happening. It was going to be does it count as an external appointment if it's your interim assistant? I don't know, but kind of assured us that it was never the plan to kind of keep Neil McDonald in place long term and this, that and the other. And I kind of said, well, if you'd have put on your statement that we are interviewing and we're looking outside, that might have calmed a few people down maybe. But yeah, he was honest. I was asking him about, transfer business, what's happening if we didn't have a new manager. Were we going to go into January kind of not doing anything? And he just kind of said, well, the world and the wife can see that we need a striker and that we need defenders. So, we are working on identifying and seeing who's available and all that sort of thing. I don't think the fact that we've waited a few days into the new year will put us at much of a disadvantage. I was listening to Radio Lancashire the other day, and Pete Wilde's not having his recruitment meeting with his board of directors until Tuesday. So he doesn't know what money he's got to spend. So we're not behind. So I'm sure we'll see some action there. And yeah, the room in general, I'll be honest, the last time I did anything vaguely hospitality wise at the football was a couple of years ago. And I'll be honest, the food was pretty poor. The service was pretty poor as well. And the lounge the other day was kind of head and shoulders above that. So yeah, fair play. And it was Baltic the other day against Salford, wasn't it? And to be in a nice warm room, there was no queues at the bar. You got your food served quickly, and it's a nice hybrid between, kind of the full on sit down meal or whatever it is and the fan zone. So it's probably something that I'll do again with my daughter when we come along, so that we're not stood outside the fan zone shivering. Yeah, it's worthwhile. It's worth a go. If it fits your budget and you fancy doing something, slightly different, then yeah, give it a try. Because at the end of the day, it's any money that comes in through hospitality and that sort of thing, it goes on the pitch, doesn't it? We're not a big bloated organisation with hundreds of staff. Pretty much it's prune juice economics, as Alan Sugar used to say. Once it goes in, it goes out the other end on the pitch, doesn't it? So yeah, give it a try.
Trying to get that picture of out my head of Alan Sugar drinking prune juice, but yeah, no, certainly a good thing. I was meant to be there New Year's Day, but couldn't make it due to coming down a lurgy a little bit as well, and trains just being awful. I think there's a bus replacement between Manchester and Lancaster somewhere, so it was just, yeah, it was a no-go. And hopefully we're trying to pin Ian Wood down for the next edition of the fanzine as well, so we can maybe dive into a bit more of them conversations, which have a bit more maybe detail post the announcement of the new manager. So let's get into that. I'll come to you first, Ronan. Nobody had him on their manager shortlist when we're looking around the league and scratching our heads thinking who the next person in charge could be. Pretty much came out of nowhere, then kind of came out of somewhere because he just turned up at FC United midweek with his nice new haircut and his pictures on Twitter. What was your initial thoughts, Ronan?
Yeah, I'm going to have to take my tinfoil hat off because I said it was going to be McDonald last time we spoke and that it was an inside job, so what did I know? Yeah, it's a completely left field appointment, isn't it, really? We've not gone for sort of a tried and tested model. We've not gone for someone who's sort of been, marauding through non-league and bashed through everybody. We've gone for sort of that youth coach, something that's got probably wide recommendations off everywhere he's been and gone for something completely David Dunn, really. Not that I'm going to say it's going to be anywhere near what David Dunn was. As a caveat point, I'm not going there yet. But no, I listened to his interview last night. He spoke really well on what was a really nicely timed and put together interview by the club. And it was just I don't feel either way. I'm not like mega positive about it. I'm not like, yeah, we've got our man, but I'm not negative about it at all. I'm excited after listening to what he said last night, but I'm not like shouting from the rooftops thinking we've got our man. So I'm really looking forward to sort of getting back in the ground, watching the football and seeing what the sort of next couple of months brings us, because we could have done something quite impressive here, but I'm sure we'll find out together, or this might come and bite me in the arse.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about him, mate, and I just went to his Wikipedia like most people, and was quite surprised his interview that he had a northern accent. I thought he was born in Glasgow, had a cap for Scotland, I think. I was expecting to hear a big kind of West Coast Ouija style accent, but yeah, he's a bit more. It's a bit more local than a first thought, Dave, which I think is a good thing. I think after Wing, I think that certainly took its toll. We spoke about that a lot on the podcast, that having a base in the Northwest, being close to family and friends is key. It certainly helps when things get tough. What was your first thoughts when Paul Gallagher, not Liam's brother, thank God, I think he's in the dock for something, isn't he? rather sticky situation. But yeah, former Preston North End stalwart Paul Gallagher.
Yeah, why are we talking about Paul Gallagher? I thought it was kind of Barrow AFC fan wisdom that the assistant was in charge, or is that just Rob Kelly that gets that treatment? Should we not be talking about John Welch and what he's going to bring and how he's going to secretly run everything in secret rooms? No, being serious, I think it is good that he's kind of relatively local. Again, going back to the Ian Wood chats, I asked about John Brady and how close he was, and he kind of said, well, he would have been another commuter manager, and it didn't. He was never really close to it, to be honest. And I think that is good for the mental health of the manager, that he's got a kind of a solid base to go back to after the training room rather than a rented flat or a hotel room, that sort of thing. I think in terms of the appointment itself, if you're not going to get a stellar appointment, someone like a Brady in terms of reputation and track record, then I think I'd rather go down the unproven route and give someone a chance, because, you might get that kind of, that hidden gem that no one's taken a chance on before, rather than someone who's kind of got a history of, paddling around the mid-table of League Two. And just made a note there in terms of, in the past when we've kind of identified a stellar target and managed to land them, you're probably going back to someone like Phil Wilson, who had league titles, as long as, CV for titles and things was as long as your arm. didn't really work out, did it, to be honest? So there's no guarantee, whether they've got a track record or they're completely unproven what they're going to do once they actually get the feet under the table. So, yeah, as Ron said, his interview was kind of pretty standard, to be honest. You probably could have given 80-90% of it yourself in terms of positive, aggressive, being on the front foot, all that sort of thing. Just see how it translates. I got in touch with a lad I know who kind of watched Preston week in, week out when Gallagher and Welsh were at Deepdale, and he kind of said that Gallagher was a stylish player, a bit of a midfield schemer, but Welsh was the yard dog next to him. He was full of bite, and I think that's the combination. We certainly need it on the pitch. We need a bit more style and we need a bit more grit. So hopefully the guys in the dugout can put that over in the training ground, and we can see a bit of improvement.
Yeah, Phil Wilson had a great tash and a great tan. That's never been I was only nearly matched by later on by a guy I won't mention because Ron hates him. So I
once saw Phil Wilson on the boat, and this is how long ago it was, and he was immaculate. He was absolutely. He looked like this is too young. This is too old a reference for you, Ronan. But there was a program called Howard's Way in the 80s, and it was for these kind of South Coast millionaires who kind of hung around the yacht scene, and they were kind of, absolutely immaculate with the blazers and the pristine shirts and the tans and all that sort of thing. And seeing Phil Wilson absolutely dressed up to the nines on the boat as a load of Barrovian youth stumbled past full of alcohol pops it was a sight to behold. Good old Phil Wilson, eh?
Yeah, I definitely watched that. Wilson on the Princess Solandia. Yeah, I think there was noticeable differences between his interview and Wing's. I've mentioned this many times before on the pod, and obviously we did the interview, and Wing arrived in the fanzine, and he was so excited to be here. You could tell, almost giddy, and a lot of us, including myself, kind of fell for him diving kind of deep first into the romanticism of Barrow and the kind of blue-collar stuff and the history of the Furness Railway. Paul Gallagher's interview, Ronan, was very much kind of just no nonsense. He kind of knows this part of the world really well. It's not novelty to him. There's a hope there for me that it might just be a little bit more straightforward and less of a learning curve for him, having played, across the Football League at good level, and kind of, just knowing the lay of the land a little bit more.
Yeah, like I said before, it was a bit more put together, wasn't it? The sort of the questions that were asked were, and I know Dave said that 80% of them you can answer yourself. It just seemed like the club had got the pause in it a little bit more internally, and just sort of maybe directed a few questions around a certain line of questioning. One about if he's local, one about keeping the fan connection together, all that sort of spiel, which they could make you feel warm inside in your tummy and that. But yeah, it's an interesting point you make about Andy Wing. He was a bit like a giddy sort of Labrador when the ball gets put in front of him, and it just seemed like Gallagher was maybe a little bit more measured in terms of his responses. But I don't know, maybe that's me reading into it ever so slightly too much. He seems very measured in the sort of 8 minutes that you got off him. I'm sure we'll get an interview from our counterparts at BBC Radio Cumbria, which might sort of poke and prod at a few different questions that maybe the club didn't want to go into, but. Yeah, stuff will start coming out over the next sort of couple of weeks. We'll see if we manage to survive the frost of Sunday and get to see him in action against Bristol Rovers, or whether we'll sort of carry on through to a 3-week break where we might have a couple of new players through the door and a new sort of style of football and new formation. Who knows? But it's definitely another time to be a little bit excited. Not necessarily in terms of we're going to go out and beat every team in the league, but just something new, something a bit different, and sort of a new era, as the club referred to it as.
Yeah, I think we've all just got to press that reset button a bit now. It's a new year, new manager, new transfer window. Let's touch on that a little bit, because there's a few rumours circling around, Dave. One of them sounds really exciting in terms of a striker, a return. The other return, maybe not so exciting. Do you want to elaborate on them a little bit? I assume you know who I'm talking about.
I presume you're talking about the Aqua rumour. Yeah, I heard that second or third hand. That definitely wasn't one that came out of the Ian Wood chat. I don't know. I mean, kind of been there, done that, haven't we, really, with Aqua? Again, he was a physical presence when he wanted to be. He was a menace when he wanted to be. He scored the odd spectacular goal, but he didn't do it consistently. It's not one that I wouldn't rush to go back and do it, but at the end of the day, would I rather have him than Cameron? Yes. Would I rather have him than Hemmings? Probably yes. Who knows what state Tyler Walker's in at the minute? Reece Healy, God knows. I'm just looking at the list of kind of people that we've got in the squad at the minute. It's pretty thin gruel, isn't it? So if it's Aqua or nobody else, then yes, welcome home, Big Emil. But I think first knockings, I'd rather go somewhere else. But again, if he comes back, puts the shirt on, I'll back him.
And how strong are the Andy Cook rumours, Ronan? I mean, I imagine we're going to get links with Andy Cook every time he's available, and it's a bit like the kind of Quigley thing, I suppose. So I never know quite what to believe, but it does seem to be kind of raising its head with some prominence. Is there anything at all from that you can put out there?
If any football club in League Two wasn't linked to Andy Cook, you'd be slightly worried, wouldn't you? Because he's extremely good at this level. He's extremely good at what he does at the same time, but I think that might be people having a little bit of fun somewhere along the line, maybe, rather than any sort of factual correctness behind it, as you know, people have done over the past. I think the first one you'll see come in when we spoke to Ian was a goalie, because it sounds like Ben Winterbottom is going to be out quite a while, judging off what he said. So that's something to get excited about, a backup goalkeeper. And then from there, you've got your striker, which everyone knows that we need. You know, Paul Gallagher basically said we need more pace at the squad. Completely agree. We definitely need more pace up front. We definitely need a pacier centre half. And then somebody was saying to me, we need a midfielder. Well, you've got Foley to come back in, and you've got MJ Williams who can move back into that sort of role. So I'm not massively concerned there. You know, to link him with Scott Smith, Raheem Harper, McCann. You might think Regan Booty's absolutely fantastic. I want to bring him back in. Got all these options, so there's plenty to look forward to. But I definitely think over this sort of, is it 2 weeks off we have effectively? I definitely think you'll probably see one, maybe two come in, and that's based off absolutely nothing before somebody comes in my Twitter DMs and starts asking me what I know, because it's he/her is the answer.
Yeah, because in midfield, I think if we look over this period, certainly kind of Scott Smith's had some really good performances in there. McCann's really started to establish himself as one of the first names on the team sheet. Harper's back, so it doesn't feel like the area where we need much more strength. And obviously there's that option to bring Booty back, who Gallagher might like and get a better tune out of than Wing did. So yeah, who knows? There's not much more I suppose we can add from that. Just before we wrap up then, obviously Bristol tomorrow or today, depending on when you're listening. Dave, do you think it's too early to see kind of formation changes or any kind of Gallagher stamp on the game, or might you just kind of throw something in there to kind of put a bit of a trademark on it?
To be honest, I think it's more of a case of getting it out of the way, and then we start with a clean slate after the Bristol Rovers game. I think they'll have played on the first, have the second off. They'll be in today, maybe, and then travelling up for tomorrow. So I think it's far too early for any kind of fundamental kind of wholesale changes, or, dare we say, a philosophy. So I think it's just a matter of seeing who's fit after the grueling festive period and getting a team out there. Maybe he might get an extra yard out of them, because obviously he's now the man in charge and he's kind of deciding futures. But I don't expect to see anything fundamentally different from the Salford game. So yeah, it's the Crew game that will really see the first kind of green shoots of the Gallagher Welsh era.
Yeah, one thing hopefully he can improve on straight away is the choice of substitutions, because they really seem to have a big impact on the game at Salford. So that might help. Ronan, do you agree with Dave? Do you think it's a little bit too early to see sort of whole scale formation changes? Because there's a little bit of pressure on this one. I mean, it'd probably be handier to have kind of Salford at home or MK Dons or Swindon or something, because with Bristol being so poor, you kind of look at this game and thinking we should be getting 3 points tomorrow. But so it does add that little bit of pressure when you're playing a struggling side at home, and we're not at home since Crew back in September. So yeah, it's not without its pressure tomorrow. So he's going to have to do something.
Yeah, like Dave said, I don't think we're going to see like massive wholesale changes at all, really. I think he'll just sort of try and get through tomorrow. as best he can, and hopefully that might lead to, you know, a good start with 3 points. You know, who knows? But I think we're gonna, once we get to that Crewe game, we're gonna start seeing a bit more about you know, the team, the squad, you know, fitness and injuries, you know, dependent. But I think tomorrow it's all about getting through to the best of your ability. You know, I don't think it's going to be pretty tomorrow. I think it's going to be, you know, ourselves against a decent Steve Evans outfit, which usually sort of takes place off the back of a 3-0 win. And well, he doesn't waddle anymore, does he? Him sort of, you know, jogging around the pitch doing his big fist bumps. So hopefully we don't get to see that Holker Street. But, you know, if there's any time to return to go and watch the soccer, and you've been a bit disenfranchised with it lately, and you know you don't necessarily want to get yourself there, I think tomorrow is probably a good place to start. Get yourself back through the door and get yourself watching what could be a really exciting time again.
Yep, I think that's a good note to end on. With a good advert for tomorrow. So get yourself down, and let's hope we can kick off with 3 points, a much needed 3 points at home, and this new era of Paul Gallagher ball. Ronan, Dave, thanks very much for your time. We'll keep this one short and sweet today, and we'll be back next week. Post Bristol game with a new pod.